So yeah, the Louisville Aflame, and how does uh, the average Texan see these things going on around the nation, and not say, how do I get out? Yeah, you know.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty common. Our organization, Kevin, every time these things happen and they're sprawled across the 24-hour news cycle, we
Mhm.
always get a surge of new supporters because there is I would say an eroding confidence in the ability from a lot of people who were on the fence about Texas to fix the union. They don't see any way. And
Uh-huh.
the presidential election, the congressional elections, they seem to really exacerbate the situation a good bit. People don't have confidence that their, especially Texans, that their wishes, their desires are going to be accurately and adequately represented through Washington, D.C. And as things become more polarized, people realize that they're literally one election away from radical Marxists being in charge and using all of these assumed powers that the federal government has to jam those policies down our throats. So yeah, I mean, it's terrible to watch on the news, but I guess the silver lining is that it brings more and more people to the realization that Texas is really the path out of this.
The latest petitions for Texas have not been met by presidents in the same way as they used to be met. What are the ramifications of that in your view?
Yeah, look, our position has always been that the issue of Texas is not one where we petition the federal government. That's not the proper place for this discussion. If the Scottish independence referendum or the Brexit referendum has really taught anyone anything, it's that this idea of self-determination, self-government is not a mother may I. We don't, as Texans, have to go to the federal government and beg for their indulgence to be able to govern ourselves and make choices about how we should govern ourselves.
Hmm.
So, where we stand is where we have always stood, which is working this issue through the Texas legislature. And, I suspect we're going to go into the next legislative session with some more allies. And I guess depending on how November goes, we may wind up with a flood of new allies in
Yeah.
the state house.
Have you lost confidence in Governor Abbott at this point? Where do you stand on the latest decisions in Austin relative to the COVID-19 restrictions, et cetera?
Greg Abbott's an embarrassment. There's no equivocating. There's no softening the blow. He's an absolute embarrassment. Our relationship as Texas advocates, but even broader as advocates for independence across the political, cultural, and economic spheres. Abbott has been a tremendous hindrance. He's a guy who loves to go on the campaign trail, who loves to use the independence talking points as applause lines. He loves to claim how he sued the federal government when Obama was president and then he was AG. But his real day-to-day governance is frankly a joke, and it's an affront to Texans. We can look at any number of things, but COVID is a perfect example. I mean, Governor Abbott has cost Texas more jobs than Barack Obama's failed policies ever did.
Mm. Boy,
Uh,
that's saying a lot right there.
well, it is saying a lot, but we take a pretty hard stance on Greg Abbott because as the governor of Texas, he has a lot of responsibility. He has a lot of responsibility to act in the best interest of Texans. He has an absolute duty to stand as a bulwark and firewall between Texans and an overbearing, overreaching federal government. And he also has a duty to speak up when necessary. And he's been a failure across all of them.
Yeah.
When it comes to something, taken away from COVID and how he's essentially broken the back of small and medium-sized businesses here in Texas, take an issue like the Alamo, the Reimagine the
Mhm.
Alamo plan in the cenotaph.
Right.
His constituents, people that donated to his campaign, that voted for him, did everything but get on their hands and knees and beg him to come out in defense of the Alamo. And his mouth was silent, but
Mm.
yet he passes, he gets behind a piece of legislation that is called the Save Chick-fil-A legislation, because city of San Antonio would not grant them rental in the airport to open a
Airport.
Chick-fil-A.
Right.
He makes it a big deal. He tweets pictures of him eating Chick-fil-A. He does all these things, but yet he can't be bothered to string together two syllables in support of the shrine of Texas liberty. Now, beyond the COVID policies and some of those other things, it's frankly inexcusable. But yet he will go out on the campaign trail and he will talk about how he's stood up for Texans and things of that nature. And we just all realize at this moment that the emperor has no clothes and hasn't had any clothes for a very long time.
I was going to say all hat, no cattle, but something in there works well.
Yeah, well, it is all hat, no cattle. But there's
And
Kevin.
what was it about? What caused it? Is it in fact the case that the governor wants to run for president, and that's why he's moderated and waffled on some of these issues?
Look, I think it's the worst kept secret in Austin that Abbott has his sights set on the White House. I mean, he has for a very long time. He followed the Rick Perry school, where he gets elected governor. He thumps his chest a bunch. He releases a book that no one reads. And I think the Trump presidency scuttled those plans for him, or at least delayed them. But if anyone thinks that Abbott does not have his sights set on 2024, they're deluding themselves.
Mhm.
Absolutely, that's what it is. When you have someone like Abbott who governs by poll numbers, I mean, literally, I wonder some days if Greg Abbott has to run a shotgun poll before he goes to pee in the morning. You got to wonder how this guy operates. But
God, I love you, man. You have a way of putting it into words.
well, look, sometimes you have to tell it like it is. As I said a moment ago, we go pretty hard against Greg Abbott because we frankly have to.
Mhm.
Anytime someone stands contrary to the mission of our organization or the principles it's founded on, or even something as fundamental for those who don't agree with us, something as fundamental as the Texas Constitution, there has to be pushback, right? And it has to be immediate, it has to be swift, it has to be hard, because there is no equivocating with some of these guys.
Mhm.
And Kevin, it generates a lot of hate mail, and frankly, that's great. That means that you're only catching flack when you're over the target.
I
Uh,
hear you.
but that's Abbott. That's our relationship with Abbott has been a spotty one, and Abbott has absolutely got to receive pushback from the people of Texas, or he's never going to learn. Frankly, Kevin, he doesn't deserve to be governor.
I hear you. Is there, it's a final question and a broad-based one. Is
Okay.
there any change in the TNM message and or mission since America fell apart, or to be more precise, since we saw a full summer worth of unrest and violence across the nation, and since we saw the COVID restrictions, and since we saw this attack on constitutional liberties, has there been any change in your strategy, your tactics, or the way that TNM does business as a result of these last few months?
Yeah, Kevin, there really hasn't been. You know,
Stay in the course.
internally for us, it's a matter of just shoring up infrastructure. I mean, I hate to be technical, because we're getting that many new supporters in. But look, I want to just say this: if you go back to my book called "Line in the Sand" that I wrote back in 2011,
Hmm.
I predicted this in
Hmm. You
2011.
did. You did.
And I said there were three possible outcomes here. Number one was a reformation of the U.S., aka let's fix things, and we see how well that's worked out. It didn't work out for the 50 to 70 years previous when people tried that, so we knew that was not a possibility. The other was balkanization,
Mhm.
right? Where we see things splitting into these factions and the divisions become clear, and those dividing lines run right through communities and break up families and enhance political polarization. And that is the least desirable outcome, because you're seeing that played out in the streets right now. And then the final option is that Texans exercise their right of self-government and become a self-governing independent nation state and craft policies that benefit Texans as a whole. That we keep that $160 billion a year overpayment that we're sending to Uncle Sam for God only knows what, and keep that money right here and stimulate our economy and fix our infrastructure and deal with the issues that we have around public education. And my warning then was, if we don't choose, it will be chosen for us.
Uh-huh.
And so here we are.
Mhm.
And that's, and look, people didn't heed the warning then, and that's fine. But here we are at a critical moment in our history,
Here
and
we are.
Texans have an opportunity. We don't have to deal with the things that we're seeing around the United States. And it takes one thing and one thing alone, and that's for Texans to make the choice to exercise their right of self-government, to become a self-governing nation state, and govern ourselves the way that we want to be governed.
You are amazing, man. I'm fascinated always by you when you talk, and your members should be very proud of the leadership that you've had with TNM over the years. And I can personally verify, yes, he was saying this a long time ago, a
I've known you,
long time
Kevin.
ago.
I've known you for a long time.
It's been a
You really
while
can
now.
date back.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you and I first met when you were in Tyler.
Yeah, it's been a long
A
time, man.
long time.
And I really appreciate all that you're doing. And we have to talk more, my friend. We have to.
Absolutely, Kev. Thank you so much.